Welcome to Turning the Tide. This is Candace, Salima, and I am here with David Rubin out of Shiloh, Israel, and he is a friend of Turning the Tide, and he has been on the show before. But today we are going to be talking about a little bit of a different topic. After close to 20 years of Palestinian Authority rule in Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus Christ, the Christian community is under increasing attack and is fading away to near oblivion. The Christian community that just a few decades ago comprised 80% of the population in Bethlehem has now dwindled to barely 15% under Palestinian Authority rule. David, this is what we're going to talk about today. I received a press release from you, and you talk about how this problem was not created in a vacuum, and that the persecution of Christians, everyone knows that Christians are persecuted horribly in Muslim nations, and the things that they do are beatings and denial of unemployment, kidnappings, sexual harassment, forced marriages, firebombing of churches, and outright murder. And so you say there is the undeniable influence of Islamic Sharia law in the Palestinian Authority and Hamas-run territories. The inferior, dhimmi is what they call Christians, and I think Jews as well, right?
Yes, anyone who is a non-Muslim has dhimmi. That dhimmi status. Usually it applies to Jews or Christians, and that's what it always was historically. And whereas other peoples have an even lower status.
Yes, it is just insane. And that is, as you said, the status officially accorded to Christians and Jews under Islam. They are continuing to vote with their feet, meaning Christians, leaving Bethlehem in droves. Jesus and his family, as persecuted non-Muslims, would have been among them. Now, I have actually been really on top of what is going on over there and how long it's been going on, David. And so today, as people know, you are the author of The Islamic Tsunami, Israel and America in the Age of Obama. And I have a couple of questions. First, Barack Obama says that he has been a great friend to Israel. I would like to know how Israel feels about that.
Well, that is a question that has been asked so many times. It's been asked in surveys, and the Israeli public, like many other publics, is a finicky public. It's you will see the opinions on that fluctuating from 4% who believed that President Obama was a pro-Israel president to about 30 or 40% in more recent polls. Now that President Obama is running for re-election and has to be very careful about what he says because he doesn't want to alienate the majority of Americans who are pro-Israel.
Well, here's the thing I don't understand, David. Does he really believe that people have such short memories?
Yes. And frankly, from what I have seen, people do have short memories about the issues that are not the most important to them. And I'll explain what I mean by that. If you look at your average Christian conservative in America, you will see that each of them has a pet issue. Each of them has an issue that is most important to him or her. For some, it's being pro-life, that you're against abortion. For some, it's being pro-marriage, that you are against homosexual marriage being legalized. For some, it's the immigration issue. But everyone has their own issue. For some, it's that America needs to have a strong foreign policy and needs to be active and strong in defense of American values on the foreign stage, and that usually includes having a strong relationship with Israel. So if Israel is not at the top of the list of priorities, then people have short memories. The economy, of course, I mentioned social issues, foreign policy issues. Of course, the economy, usually trumps all. So if a candidate seems to be going in the right direction on the economy, then very often people are going to vote for him or her, even if that candidate is not positive on one or any of the issues.
You know, I must be a very different kind of American, conservative American then, because I'm fully capable of handling multiple issues, and Israel's one of them.
Well, thank God. Well, you're a woman, so, women are known for that.
Yes, we can multitask.
Yes, but there are men who can do that also.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, I hope wasn't offending anybody by saying that, but I'm just stating what it seems to me that people do have short memories when it comes to particular issues.
Sadly.
And that's what I'm saying, that they will put certain issues to the side in order to get the overall issue, the overall message that they want to get across. So that's what I was referring to.
Makes sense. Okay, let's go ahead and get back to our topic. I just really wanted to know how Israel was viewing Barack Obama and his statement of his being such a great friend to Israel, best ever, and then saying he's the fourth greatest president in the history of America, and the man's quite delusional. But let's get back to Bethlehem.
Yeah.
Why don't we talk about, as everyone knows, Christmas was yesterday, and everyone knows that Jesus Christ was born in Bethlehem. While the date may be disputed, the place is not. And what I would like to know is, how did it become a Muslim city? How did something that should always be under Jewish control become a Muslim city?
Well, that's the ironic thing that Jesus, it's not just Christians being harassed and persecuted in Bethlehem and their population dwindling because they are fleeing in droves from Bethlehem today. It's also that Jesus, as a Jew, would not have been allowed to come into Bethlehem.
Yeah.
Without being harassed and possibly even killed. If I walk in Bethlehem today as an observant Jew, as someone who was clearly identified as being Jewish, I will most likely be killed or wounded in a terrorist attack because we're just not allowed in there now under the Palestinian Authority.
But how did that happen? How did Bethlehem become under control of the Palestinian Authority? What do they care about Bethlehem?
Well, I told you that that Israelis are no better than any other people when it comes to surveys. And Israelis can be tricked by the phrasing of a survey, and Israelis also can be fooled when they don't understand English so well. They can be fooled by a president and his campaign team putting certain spin on their campaign promotions. And this is what has been happening. President Obama, when he came into office, his first phone call to a foreign leader was to Mahmoud Abbas, the head of this Palestinian terrorist authority. His first two foreign...
Go ahead.
What did you say, Candace?
I said, believe me, we noticed who his first phone call was to.
Right. And then his first two visits were to Istanbul, Turkey, where he proudly and publicly visited mosques, and then to Cairo, Egypt, where he spoke about the Holy Quran and the sound to prayer, the call to prayer from the mosques being the prettiest sound on earth. So this has been the clear of President Obama. This has been showing his true colors in his first year in office. He also spoke to the head of NASA, Charles Bolden, and he told him that he sees as one of the main goals of NASA being to help the Muslim nations feel good about their accomplishments in math and science.
Which is ridiculous. I don't care whether they feel good or not. They're in charge of whether they feel good.
Well, why should the president of the free world care about that or consider that to be a major mission of the National Aeronautic Space Agency? It's just bizarre.
It is. So how does that tie into Bethlehem?
Okay, so it was made very clear where President Obama's allegiances and his affinities lie.
Yes.
And Bethlehem today, we now have a situation where President Obama has given all of his support to this Palestinian Authority. Now, what is the Palestinian Authority? It is a quasi-governmental agency that was given autonomy. It consists of two terrorist organizations, the Hamas terrorist organization and the Fatah terrorist organization. And Israelis have allowed this to happen, have allowed them to receive autonomy. Why? Because they have been told, not just from President Obama, and not just from the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. They have been told, they've been basically sold a bill of goods. They have been told that this Palestinian Authority, that these Palestinian terrorist organizations now want peace. And this all happened 18 years ago. This is when it all started, and it's been that way for the past 18 years. We've had this illusionary peace process that everyone supposedly believes in, but they really don't.
David, may I ask a quick question right there? How many rockets are fired into Israel on a daily basis?
Oh, there are rockets being fired in on a daily basis. It depends. It varies from day to day. But the fact is that there are 50,000 plus missiles being pointed at Israeli cities.
How is that peace? Speak. How can anyone be deceived into believing that is any type of peace? That's war.
Of course, but that is what has happened. It's the greatest the greatest Islamic deception since the time of Muhammad and the writing of the Quran, which came shortly thereafter.
It's boggling my mind, David. I can't understand it. How anyone can be deceived. The facts are there.
Yeah, you would think so. Well, Israelis are starting to wake up to that, but it's taken them about 18 years of American pressure and European pressure to finally understand that there comes a time when you have to just say no. Enough of this. And the UN...
collateral damage to this whole process?
Well, it's a big problem now because there is somewhat of a fait accompli. You have cities like Ramallah and Shechem and Bethlehem, Bethlehem, we call it Bethlehem by the original Hebrew name. Okay. And these places, the Muslims are just taking over, where there once were 80% Christians in Bethlehem, there now are less than 15% Christians. This is the situation today. Terrorist groups are active there. They are harassing any non-Muslims. And yes, on Christmas
not just harassing. That's a mild term for what's going on.
I agree. And so what we have today is that on Christmas they put on a very nice show. The terrorists go into hiding, so that the annual Christmas show can be put on, and the Palestinian Authority stands with their armed guards, and they make sure that show goes on so that the world will be fooled, because the world only looks at Bethlehem about once a year. So once Christmas passes, you're not going to hear about Bethlehem in the news, and they will go back to the old situation where the Muslims are in control and are persecuting everyone who is not a Muslim. And that is the situation today in Bethlehem.
Was Bethlehem ever under Israeli control?
Yes, it was under Israeli control from the Six-Day War, which was in June of 1967, when we miraculously won the war in 6 days, and on the seventh day we rested.
You're so kind. I say you guys kicked their butts 6 ways from Sunday. You're much better person than I am, David.
Yeah, well, look, these are the facts. You know, the Jewish Sabbath starts on Friday night and ends on Saturday night. The Six-Day War ended before the Sabbath.
Yes, it did.
You know, and I think God is telling us something there.
Indeed, He is, David.
So we won that war in 6 days. We recaptured the biblical heartland of Israel, Judea, which includes Hebron, where the patriarchs and matriarchs of Israel are buried, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and their wives, and Bethlehem, of course, where Jesus was born, where King David was born and grew up. These are historic places. In Samaria, Shiloh, which is where I live, which was the first capital of Israel, Bethel, and all these places, many of which exist also in the United States, because the founding fathers in the United States understood how strong that biblical connection was, and truly believed that there was something in the whole concept of the chosen people and the promised land when they came to America. So all of this took place in 1967. Then Israel was in control from 67 until 93, and the population, the Christian population, at that point had already started to decrease somewhat, simply because the Muslims have many more children than the Christians, and that has been the situation for a long time. It still is, and even in America, you look at the Muslim immigrants, and you see that there is a demographic threat there as well.
Yes.
But in Bethlehem, that was the situation until 1993. At that point, there was still a majority of Christians living in Bethlehem, although it had greatly decreased. It was no longer 80%. It was down to some 60-65%. Then after 93, when this foolish peace process was started and the Palestinian Authority was established.
Yeah, that was under President Bill Clinton.
Correct. And that Palestinian Authority was established, which basically gave the Muslims control in Bethlehem. The head of the Palestinian Authority and the PLO, Yasser Arafat, he appointed a Muslim governor in Bethlehem, and they still had a Christian mayor who was just a figurehead at this point, and they started to change things in Bethlehem to the point where we got where we are today, with only 15% being Christian.
I am utterly horrified, David. This entire thing it's getting to the point where I see betrayal at all levels, at any point of freedom. Does that make sense, David?
Sure. This is a religious war. People don't like to say that.
But it is.
It makes them feel very uncomfortable because, yes, but Americans and Israelis as well, and anyone in the free world believes very strongly in freedom of religion, freedom of worship.
We do.
Believes in intolerance towards those who have different religious opinions, as long as it doesn't infringe on the rights of others. But here we are talking about a particular ideology that claims to be a religion, and it's called Islam, and it not only harasses but persecutes others, and in fact sanctions the killing of others and sanctions the oppression of women.
And so that brings us to our next point, David, is Sharia law. I have studied Sharia law quite extensively, and I'm horrified by every aspect of it. It is the political set of rules of Islam, basically. And one of the questions you sent in your press release is, why is it a problem for Christians living under the Palestinian Authority and Hamas with Sharia law being implemented? I know the answer to that, but why don't we discuss that next? Because that's right where you were leading.
Okay, well, so you ask about why Sharia law is a problem for Christians living under the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, and the answer is very, very simple. That Sharia law states very clearly that every non-Muslim is a second-class citizen. And okay, what do we mean by that? So there are a lot of specifics in that people, they could hear me talking about Sharia law. They could hear me talking about how terrible Sharia law is, and that Islamic law is a danger for all non-Muslims. But they don't really.
Even for Muslims, Sharia law is horrific at all levels.
Sure. Well, but they don't understand what it is. So
okay, go ahead.
So let's try to be a little bit more specific here. And so the bottom line is this: when we talk about Sharia law, we are talking about these basic points that under Sharia law, it is impermissible to build a church, a synagogue, or any other place of worship other than a mosque. Okay, I can't get more specific than that.
No,
it is forbidden to renovate any place of worship other than a mosque. And if you look at Libya or Egypt, recent current events, in Egypt there were riots in which Christians were massacred. That was because there was a rumor going around that they were going to be renovating one of the churches.
Well, even in Nigeria yesterday, there were attacks on Christian churches all across the nation, as terrorist attacks. That
is absolutely true. So here, let me get through a few of these points. I'm not going to go through all of them. In my book, The Islamic Tsunami, I listed 20 points, which are basically 20 disabilities that any non-Muslim has to subject himself to, which is, that term dhimmi, which means a disabled individual. And it's not a disability that comes from birth, it's a disability that is imposed on them. Okay, so no new places of worship, no renovation of any old places of worship which have been destroyed by the Muslims. Muslim travelers are allowed to stay over in places of worship that are not mosques. So basically, churches and synagogues have to be used as free motels for Muslims, and they are not allowed to prevent them from staying there. Any Muslim who appears at a home of a Christian or a Jew, they have to entertain him for 3 days, and for a longer period if the Muslim falls ill. They have to show respect towards every Muslim. They have to allow Muslims to participate in their private meetings. The Christians and Jews are not allowed to dress like Muslims or to name themselves with Muslim names. They're not allowed to possess arms. They are not allowed to sell or drink any alcoholic beverage. They have to wear a distinctive dress which shows their inferior status to separate them from the Muslims. They are not allowed to observe their religious practices publicly, and any American soldier who has served in the Persian Gulf and Saudi Arabia and countries like that knows that They are not allowed to observe their religious practices publicly. They are followed and they are harassed if they do. And they are not allowed to build their houses in the neighborhoods of Muslims. So these are some of the main points of what it is to be a dhimmi, of what it is to be an inferior citizen in an Islamic country. And
well,
this is all
under
sanctioned.
Yes, it is sanctioned. Under Sharia law, there's so many more abuses and oh gosh, the words are just escaping me. I listened to you list all of those things, and they are horrific, except the one part where they couldn't dress like Muslims and they couldn't have Muslim names. I was like, oh, all right, that's fine. But the entire thing, and then how they treat women and how they treat children and how an elite ruling class is set up as above a peasant class, and everything, every aspect of Sharia law, including everything that you listed, is horrific. And it should have no place in the modern world. It is a barbaric, medieval rule of law. Now, with that being understood, obviously there is persecution in other parts of the world. Why should we focus on Bethlehem?
The reason is very simple, because I have to explain to you and your listeners that I've been living in Israel for 20 years. Okay, I'm a Jew. I would be identified as an Orthodox Jew, which basically means that I'm a Jew who believes in the Torah, in the Torah of Israel as God's word. Okay, that it was given on Mount Sinai to the Jewish people as a divine inheritance along with the land of Israel. Now, having said all that, I have to tell you that as one I grew up in America, even though I've been living in Israel for 20 years, and I remember Christmas very well. I mean, it's not observed that much in Israel, but I remember it very well, and I remember the reverence with which people hold Christmas and Bethlehem, and I remember all the ceremonies that were always shown on television in Bethlehem, and it is the cradle of Christianity. Because it is literally the cradle of Jesus. Now, having said that, we have to understand that there is a civilization around the world called Judeo-Christian civilization, which is prominent in America, and once was even stronger in America. The founding fathers. That's right. The founding fathers were all religious Christians, and they also had a strong tie to the Bible of Israel. And in fact, Hebrew, the language of Israel, could be spoken in a commencement address. You could give a whole commencement address in Hebrew in any Ivy League university. This was permitted, and the president of Harvard University in colonial times in America was an ardent Hebraist. He was a Hebrew scholar. Now, all of this is not in a vacuum. Today, in Bethlehem, when you have a situation where there is Muslim persecution of the cradle of what is commonly known in the West as Judeo-Christian civilization, that is a direct threat to Judeo-Christian civilization. The Muslims in the land of Israel view it as such. They recognize that these are the front lines of the struggle against Judeo-Christian civilization.
In other words, it was very deliberate. What they're doing is extremely deliberate in trying to overtake and destroy the cradle of Christianity.
That's right. That's absolutely correct. And that's why Bethlehem is their immediate target. That's why Jerusalem is their immediate target. Jerusalem, for example, is mentioned 700 times in the Bible.
Yeah. Is that all?
You know what that is? 700 times. It
Wow.
is not mentioned once in the Quran.
Of course not.
Yet, so why do they claim that Jerusalem is theirs? Because they see their long-term attack on Judeo-Christian civilization as being focused on Jerusalem in the short term. Because the Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and places like it are the front lines of the struggle against Judeo-Christian civilization. That's how the Muslims refer to it, and they talk about that when they speak in Arabic very openly. And occasionally they slip in English and say it as well. When they say things like, first we're going to get the Saturday people and then the Sunday people.
Yeah.
But it's clear what they mean, it's clear what they want. And the Muslim Brotherhood, I'm sure you've heard of them. The Muslim Brotherhood that just, along with their more extreme Salafist Muslim compatriots in Egypt, have just won almost 3/4 of the vote in the parliamentary elections in Egypt. Well, the Muslim Brotherhood.
It's very funny that Egypt rioted for freedom and then promptly gave it right over again.
Yeah, well, they weren't rioting for freedom. They were rioting for free elections so that they could elect Muslim authorities that will impose Sharia law.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what is happening today.
Have they gone after Nazareth as well?
There is a lot of tension right now in Nazareth, and has been for a number of years. Israel is still in control in Nazareth because it is not part of what they call the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. And Judea and Samaria, the areas that I spoke about before, where Bethlehem and Shiloh and Hebron are, and Bethel are, Judea and Samaria is what they call the West Bank. And the West Bank has been partially given Palestinian authority. So the Muslims have been given partial authority over the West Bank, but they haven't been given any security authority or governmental authority in Nazareth at this point. Nazareth is up in the lower Galilee. But there is a lot of very subtle oppression of the Christian population in Nazareth, and tension from the Muslims. And,
those would be the key cities: Nazareth, Bethlehem, and Jerusalem. If you're going to go after Christianity, those are the 3 cities you would go after to destroy.
That's absolutely true, and they know what they're doing.
Yes, they do.
Yep.
Oh, David, it just... Oh.
So let me just tell you this, Candace. Let me just tell you this, because this is what I started to say, that the Muslim Brotherhood, in its central doctrine, calls for, and I quote, and listen to this quote very carefully, they call for a globalist, jihadist, jihad meaning holy war, of course, against all non-Muslims. They call for a globalist, jihadist process to destroy and eliminate the Western civilization from within.
Yes.
Now, if that doesn't say it to you in the open, in English.
Yes. And Barack Obama supports the Muslim Brotherhood. Hillary Clinton supports the Muslim Brotherhood, saying that they are not dangerous, they're not this, they're not that. They're dangerous to everyone who is not Muslim.
That's right. And the Vice President, Joe Biden, just said that the Taliban is not an enemy of the United States, despite the fact that they've been shooting at American soldiers for the past any number of years.
Well, we like to call Joe Biden as the gift that keeps on giving, because every time he opens his mouth, he says something so asinine that it dents the Democrats even more.
Yes, the problem is that if you look at the media, any time something is said that might be seem a little bit controversial by Newt Gingrich or any other Republican, is going to be looked at with a microscope and is They're going to be called just loose talkers, loose cannons, and who can't be trusted. But when Joe Biden says it, well, it may get a little attention on one or two of the conservative stations, but it's quickly swept aside.
Well,
and he's the vice president.
I know he is. He gets his comments. All of these things you and I are discussing, David, gets a huge amount of attention on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Google+. And what the mainstream media is not doing, the social networks are. That is where the educating of America is going on right now.
Sure.
Now,
and talk radio, of course.
And talk radio, that's right. Now, you said, and this is just, do you know what, David, these questions, these things we're talking, there aren't even words in the English language for how astonished I am and at the brazen attitude of Muslims. Now, you said that many Palestinians blame Israel's occupation of Judea and Samaria, which is the West Bank as you identified, for the sad plight of the Christians under the Palestinian Authority. That is the most ridiculous. Are they trying to get an all-out war with the free world? Is that what they're trying to do?
Sure. But to blame Israel for their conditions is of course an old tactic. You have to remember when I was just talking about the presidential candidates, when Newt Gingrich referred to the Palestinians as an invented people a couple of weeks ago.
I happen to agree with you.
I agree with him 100%. He was blasted from all sides.
Yes, he was.
But I immediately put up a post on my Facebook page praising him for it, because he stated a very basic fact that there was no Palestinian people. They didn't exist. There was never a nation of Arab Muslims that call themselves Palestinians in the land of Israel.
That's right.
Or in the Middle East or anywhere in the world. And so they've managed, number one, and in the past 30 or 40 years, they have managed to convince the world that there is a Palestinian nation that has a right to an independent state in the Middle East, in the heart of Israel. They have convinced the world that there is a place called the West Bank, even though that term did not exist until 1948, when the Jordanians were in control of the eastern side of and the western side of the Jordan River. They have also convinced people that Israel is occupying a land that doesn't belong to it. And Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem and all of these places, as anyone who is biblically literate knows, are the heartland of the land of Israel. And historical Israel, going back several thousand years even. So they have managed to also carry out this hoax that Israel is to blame for the situation, the sad situation of the Christians under the Palestinian Authority. And the world has swallowed it, partially because of the efforts of the Islamic ideologues, partly because of the efforts of the far left, and of course the Obama administration represents both, where you have all these Islamic advisors to President Obama, and President Obama himself coming from a Muslim background, and Hillary Clinton being a staunch leftist, and quite a number of other people in his administration saying that they are staunch leftists is a tremendous understatement.
Yes, it is very much an understatement. Now, David, we need to take a quick break. We've gone 10 minutes over break time. We were up in the middle, caught up in the middle of this conversation. So you have about a 2.5-minute break, and then we'll go another 20 minutes for the rest of the interview, okay?
Okay, sounds good.